My mom always used me for money, so finally I cut her off completely. It started when I was 15, babysitting my younger brother while she went out drinking. She'd come home at 3 a.m., shake me awake, and demand whatever cash I'd earned. "Family shares everything," she'd say, her breath reeking of vodka and cigarettes. By 16, I was working 2 jobs after school. Retail on weekdays, catering on weekends. Every paycheck disappeared into her purse before I could even deposit it. She needed it for rent, she said, for groceries, for the electric bill that somehow never got paid despite my contributions. When I turned 18, I opened my own bank account at a branch across town. She found out within a week, showed up at my work screaming about betrayal and disrespect. My manager had to escort her out while customers stared. That night, she cried and apologized, said she was just stressed, promised things would change. They never did. College was supposed to be my escape. I'd worked secretly for 2 years, hiding cash in the lining of my winter boots. I had $3,800 saved when I finally told her I was leaving for state university. She smiled, hugged me, said she was proud. The next morning, my boots were slashed open and empty. "You owed me that," she said flatly, "for raising you all these years." I went anyway, taking out loans, working campus jobs, sleeping in my car some nights when I couldn't afford both rent and tuition. Meanwhile, she'd call twice a day. Her car broke down and she needed $600. The landlord was evicting her and she needed first and last month's rent. Her boyfriend left and she needed money for therapy. Every excuse designed to trigger my guilt. For 3 years, I sent what I could while living on ramen and hope. Then my roommate's mom visited and saw how I lived. She was the one who finally said the words out loud. "Honey, that's not normal. That's financial abuse." I stopped answering her calls, changed my number. She showed up at my dorm anyway, causing such a scene that campus security banned her from the property. She started calling my professors, my employers, anyone she could find connected to me. She told them I was mentally ill, that I'd stolen from her, that she was a concerned mother trying to help her troubled daughter. I graduated, moved 4 hours away, and blocked her on everything. For 6 months, I had peace. I got promoted at my job, started therapy, began saving money that actually stayed in my account. Then last Tuesday, my aunt called. The aunt I hadn't spoken to in 5 years because she'd always taken mom's side. "Your mother's in the hospital," she said. "Stage 4 lung cancer. She's asking for you." I drove there that night, my hands shaking on the steering wheel. Part of me hoped we'd finally have the conversation we'd never had, that she'd apologize, explain, acknowledge what she'd done. When I walked into her room, she looked so small in that hospital bed, oxygen tubes in her nose, her skin gray and papery. "Baby," she whispered, reaching for my hand. "I'm so glad you came." For a moment, my heart softened. Then she said, "The treatment's not covered by insurance. I need $80,000. I pulled my hand away slowly. "What?" "The doctors say I have 6 months without treatment, maybe a year with it." Her eyes filled with tears. "You're the only one who can help me. Your aunt doesn't have that kind of money. Your brother's still in community college." There it was. The same script, different emergency. My chest tightened with a familiar rage I'd spent 2 years in therapy trying to process. "You haven't spoken to me in 6 months, I said quietly. "You didn't call when I got my promotion. You didn't congratulate me when I bought my first car. You didn't even send a text on my birthday. I was giving you space," she said, her voice cracking. "You made it clear you didn't want me around. I made it clear I wouldn't be your ATM anymore." She started crying then, that desperate sobbing that used to make me cave every single time. "How can you be so cruel? I'm dying." My aunt stepped into the room, glaring at me like I was the monster. "She's your mother. She raised you, fed you, kept a roof over your head. With my money," I said, standing up. "Starting when I was 15 years old. That's what family does," my aunt snapped. "We help each other." I looked at Mom, at her tear-streaked face and trembling hands. For years, I'd imagined this moment differently. I'd pictured her finally seeing me, finally acknowledging the damage she'd caused. Instead, here she was, even on her deathbed, still playing the same game. "I'm sorry you're sick," I said, grabbing my purse. "I genuinely am, but I can't do this anymore. Please," Mom begged, reaching for me. "I'll die without this treatment." I walked toward the door, my aunt blocking my path. "If you leave now, you'll regret this for the rest of your life." "Maybe," I said, "but at least it'll be my life." I drove home in silence, my phone vibrating nonstop with calls from my aunt, from Mom's friends, from relatives I hadn't heard from in years. All of them had the same message. How dare I abandon my dying mother? What kind of daughter refuses to help when her parent is sick? Hadn't she sacrificed everything for me? I turned my phone off and sat in my apartment, the one I'd furnished slowly over 2 years with furniture I'd actually chosen and paid for myself. Every item in this space represented freedom. The blue couch I'd bought on sale, the bookshelf I'd assembled at midnight after a double shift, the photos on the wall of me and my actual friends, people who cared about me without expecting payment. My therapist's words echoed in my head. "You're allowed to protect yourself. You're allowed to have boundaries. You're allowed to say no." But saying no to a dying woman felt different. It felt cruel. Even knowing everything she'd done, even understanding it was manipulation, part of me wondered if I was making a mistake I could never undo. The next morning, I went to work like normal. My coworker Bethany noticed I was off and pulled me aside during lunch. "You okay? You look exhausted." I told her everything. The hospital visit, the money demand, the guilt crushing my chest. She listened without interrupting, then said something I didn't expect. My mom was an addict, Bethany said quietly. Pills first, then heroin. For years, every time she called, it was an emergency. She needed money for rent, for food, for medical bills. Always dying, always desperate. I gave her everything I had until I was broke and suicidal. What happened? I stopped, she said simply. And you know what? She didn't die. She got angry, then she got help, then she got clean. It took 3 years and she had to hit absolute rock bottom first. But she couldn't do that while I was enabling her. This is different, I said. My mom actually has cancer. Maybe, Bethany replied. But manipulation is manipulation, even when it's wrapped in a real tragedy. That night, I called the hospital and asked to speak with mom's doctor. He confirmed she had stage 4 lung cancer. He also confirmed that while treatment was expensive, there were payment plans, financial assistance programs, and charity care options available. She wasn't being refused treatment because she couldn't pay up front. She just wanted the money immediately. I sat with that information for 2 days. Then I called my aunt back. I'm not giving her $80,000, I said, but I'll help her navigate the hospital's financial assistance program. I'll help her apply for charity care. I'll research clinical trials and support groups. That's not what she needs, my aunt said coldly. It's what I'm offering. My aunt hung up. An hour later, my phone exploded with messages from extended family I barely knew. Cousins, second cousins, mom's old coworkers, all telling me what a selfish, heartless daughter I was. Someone started a Facebook post about me, painting me as the villain who abandoned her cancer-stricken mother. They posted old photos of me as a child. Mom smiling beside me, captioned with things like, "She gave this girl everything," and "This is how she repays unconditional love." My brother called me crying. He was 19 now, still living at home, still under mom's influence. "How can you do this to her?" he sobbed. "She's dying and you won't even help." I offered to help, I said calmly. I offered to help her get real assistance. She wants cash. Because she's desperate, because she's scared. I was desperate and scared when I was 16 and sleeping in my car, I said. Where was everyone then? He didn't have an answer for that. He just kept crying, kept begging me to reconsider. When I refused, he called me a cold, heartless bitch and hung up. I blocked him too. My therapist helped me work through the guilt. "You're not responsible for saving her," she reminded me gently. "You're not required to set yourself on fire to keep someone else warm, not even your mother. But knowing something intellectually and feeling it emotionally are two different things." Every night, I'd lie awake wondering if I was wrong, wondering if years from now I'd look back and realize I'd made the worst decision of my life, wondering if refusing to help made me just as bad as her. 3 weeks passed. My aunt called again, her tone different this time, tired, defeated. "Your mother's starting treatment next week. The hospital set up a payment plan." "That's good," I said carefully. "She's furious with you. Says you've killed your relationship forever." "We didn't have a relationship," I replied. "We had a transaction." And I closed the account. My aunt was quiet for a long moment. Then she said something that shocked me. "Maybe you're right. Maybe I should have said something years ago when I saw what she was doing to you. But she's my sister, and I didn't want to believe she'd use her own kid like that." But she did. "Yes," my aunt admitted. "She did." After that call, the harassment slowed. Not because people understood, but because they moved on to the next family drama. My name was still mud at family gatherings I no longer attended. I was still the cautionary tale about ungrateful children. But at least they stopped blowing up my phone. Life went back to normal. Or what passed for normal after you cut off your dying mother. 4 months later, I got a call from my brother. His voice was different. Older somehow. "Can we talk?" he asked. "Really talk?" We met at a coffee shop halfway between our cities. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, his clothes rumpled. "Mom's still in treatment," he said. "It's not going well. The cancer spread to her liver." My heart clenched despite everything. "I'm sorry. She's running out of money again," he continued. "She asked me to get a job and give her my paychecks." I stayed quiet, watching him process it. "I'm 19, he said, his voice breaking. "I'm supposed to be figuring out college, figuring out my life. But instead, I'm working 40 hours a week at a warehouse and giving her every penny, and it's still not enough. What are you going to do?" He wiped his eyes roughly. "I don't know. She's my mom. She's dying. How can I say no?" I reached across the table and took his hand. "I'm going to tell you what someone told me. You're allowed to protect yourself. You're allowed to have boundaries. You're allowed to say no. But what if she dies and I wasn't there for her?" "She's already not there for you," I said gently. "She's never been there for you. Not really." We sat in that coffee shop for 3 hours while he unraveled years of conditioning and guilt. By the end, he was sobbing into his coffee cup, finally allowing himself to feel the anger and betrayal he'd suppressed for so long. "I thought I was the problem," he whispered. "I thought I was selfish for wanting to keep my own money." "You're not the problem," I assured him. "You never were." He moved in with me 2 weeks later, got a job at a bookstore, started taking night classes at community college. Mom called him 50 times that first week. He blocked her number on day 3. The extended family came after him too, but he'd seen my example and knew how to weather it. "Let them think what they want," he said one night over dinner. "We know the truth." 6 months after I left that hospital room, my aunt called with the news I'd been dreading and expecting. Mom had died. Peacefully, she said, in hospice care with my aunt beside her. "Did she say anything?" I asked, not sure what I wanted the answer to be. "She was angry until the end," my aunt admitted. "Angry at you? Angry at your brother? angry at the world for making her sick. She never apologized, never acknowledged what she'd done. She truly believed you both owed her everything. I cried that night, not because I'd lost her. I'd lost her years ago if I'd ever really had her at all. I cried for the mother I'd never had, the mother who could have loved me without conditions, supported me without expecting payment, seen me as a daughter instead of a resource. My brother and I didn't go to the funeral. We sent flowers anonymously and spent that day hiking in the mountains, talking about our childhoods, filling in pieces of each other's stories. He told me about the times Mom had hit him when he couldn't produce money. I told him about the time she'd stolen my college acceptance letter so I couldn't leave. We cried together, laughed together, and began the long process of healing together. The extended family never forgave us. We're still the villains in their story, the ungrateful children who abandoned their dying mother. At Thanksgiving dinners we don't attend, they probably still talk about us with disgust and disappointment. But here's what they don't know. My brother graduated with honors. He's in grad school now, studying social work with a focus on financial abuse. I got promoted twice and finally have a savings account with actual money in it. We spend holidays together, sometimes just the two of us, sometimes with friends who've become our chosen family. We're happy. Maybe for the first time in our lives, we're genuinely, uncompromisingly happy. Sometimes people ask me if I regret it, if I wish I'd handled things differently, if I lie awake at night wondering what if. The truth is complicated. I wish I'd had a different mother. I wish she'd been capable of loving me without seeing me as a transaction. I wish her last months hadn't been filled with anger and resentment. But I don't regret protecting myself. I don't regret drawing boundaries. I don't regret choosing my own survival over her bottomless need. My therapist once told me that guilt is the price we pay for our values. If I felt nothing about cutting off my dying mother, that would mean I didn't value compassion or family or human life. The guilt proves I'm not heartless, but guilt doesn't mean I was wrong. Sometimes the right decision still hurts. Sometimes protecting yourself means disappointing people. Sometimes love isn't enough to fix what's broken. A year after Mom died, my aunt reached out again. She wanted to meet for lunch. I almost said no, but something in her message felt different, humbler, less judgmental. We met at a quiet restaurant, and for the first time in my life, she really listened. I've been thinking a lot about your childhood, she said, stirring her coffee absently. About the things I saw and ignored. I told myself it wasn't my place to interfere, that parents have the right to raise their kids however they want. And now I realize I failed you, she said, her voice thick with emotion. I knew what she was doing. I knew it was wrong. And I did nothing. We talked for hours. She told me things I'd never known, how Mom had been the same way with their own mother, constantly demanding money, throwing tantrums when she didn't get her way, how my grandmother had died nearly broke because Mom had drained her accounts, how the whole family had enabled it, making excuses, pretending it was normal. I don't want your forgiveness, my aunt said as we were leaving. I just wanted you to know that you were right. You were right to protect yourself. You were right to leave. And I'm sorry I made you feel like the villain for surviving. That conversation didn't fix everything. Years of damage can't be repaired over lunch. But it was something. A small acknowledgement that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't the monster everyone had painted me to be. My brother and I started a support group for young adults who'd experienced financial abuse from family members. It started small, just 6 people meeting in a library conference room. Now we have 40 regular attendees and a waiting list. People from all walks of life, all with the same story. Parents who saw them as ATMs. Siblings who guilted them into funding lifestyles. Relatives who believed family obligation meant financial slavery. Every week, someone new stands up and shares their story, their voice shaking, their eyes filled with shame they don't deserve. And every week, the group responds with something they've never heard before. It's not your fault. You deserved better. You're allowed to protect yourself. I watch people transform over months. Watch them set boundaries, move out, open their own bank accounts, learn to say no without drowning in guilt. It's the healing I wish I'd had at 15. The support I desperately needed at 18. The validation that might have saved me years of therapy. Sometimes I think about Mom. Wonder what made her that way. Whether she'd been hurt by someone and learned to hurt in return. Whether she'd ever felt guilty, or if she truly believed children existed to serve their parents. I'll never know. And I've made peace with not knowing. What I do know is this. Breaking the cycle cost me everything I thought family meant. It cost me my mother, most of my extended family, years of being painted as the villain. But it gave me something infinitely more valuable. It gave me myself. It gave me the chance to build a life that wasn't about survival. It gave me the freedom to discover who I could be when I wasn't being drained dry. My brother got engaged last month. His fiancée Whitney comes from a huge, warm, functional family. The kind that actually shows up for each other without expecting payment. The kind that says, I love you, and means it without conditions. At their engagement party, Whitney's mom pulled me aside and said, thank you for taking care of him, for showing him what real family looks like. I almost laughed. Real family? Yes, she said firmly. Family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up, who protects you, who loves you without keeping score. My brother's wedding is next spring. He asked me to walk him down the aisle since our father was never in the picture. I said yes through tears, not sad tears, grateful tears. Because somehow, despite everything, despite the dysfunction and abuse and years of conditioning, we'd both made it out. We'd both survived. And we'd done it by choosing each other when the rest of our family had proven they'd only choose us if we paid the fee. I still have hard days. Days when I scroll through old photos and wish things had been different. Days when I see mothers and daughters shopping together, laughing together, and feel that old familiar ache. Days when the guilt creeps back in and whispers that maybe I should have tried harder, given more, been better. But then I remember. I remember being 15 and handing over my babysitting money. I remember being 18 and finding my college funds stolen. I remember being 22 and sleeping in my car because I'd given her rent money instead of paying my own. I remember standing in that hospital room, looking at my dying mother, and finally choosing myself. And I know I made the right choice. The hard choice. The choice that cost me everything except my soul. Some people will never understand. They'll never comprehend how a child could walk away from a dying parent. They'll never accept that sometimes love isn't enough. That sometimes the most loving thing you can do is stop participating in your own destruction. I'm okay with being misunderstood. I'm okay with being the villain in someone else's story. Because in my story, the one that actually matters, I'm the hero, the survivor, the one who broke the cycle, the one who chose life over obligation, the one who learned that protecting yourself isn't selfish, it's necessary. My mom always used me for money, so finally I cut her off completely, and it saved my life. 3 years after her death, something unexpected happened. I received a letter from Mom's lawyer. She'd left a will. I'd assumed everything had gone to my aunt, if there was anything left at all. The lawyer asked me to come to his office. Said there was something I needed to see. I almost didn't go. What could she possibly have left me except more guilt? But curiosity won out. My brother came with me, both of us nervous and confused. The lawyer's office was small, cluttered with case files and coffee cups. He gestured for us to sit and slid a sealed envelope across the desk. "Your mother left this for you," he said, with instructions that it only be opened after her death, and only by you. I stared at the envelope, my name written in her handwriting, the same handwriting that had signed permission slips and written grocery lists and forged my signature on stolen checks. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside was a single page, her words cramped and uneven. "To my daughter," it began. And then, impossibly, "I'm sorry." I couldn't believe what I was reading. The letter went on for 2 pages, detailing things I'd never known, how her own mother had used her the same way, how she'd promised herself she'd never do that to her children, then found herself repeating the pattern, how she'd been too proud, too ashamed, too broken to stop. "I told myself I deserved your money," she wrote, "that I'd earned it by giving birth to you, by keeping you alive. But the truth is, I was scared. Scared of being alone, of being worthless, of facing my own failures. So I took and took until there was nothing left to take. Until you were gone." The letter didn't excuse anything, didn't undo the damage or erase the years of therapy I'd needed, but it did something I never expected. It acknowledged the truth. "You were right to leave," she wrote near the end. "You were right to protect yourself. I hope someday you can forgive me, but I understand if you can't. I can't even forgive myself." I read the letter 3 times, then handed it to my brother. He read it silently, tears streaming down his face. When he finished, he looked up at the lawyer. "Is there anything else?" The lawyer nodded and opened a filing cabinet. He pulled out a small box and set it on the desk. Inside were stacks of receipts. Every single dollar I'd ever given her, documented. Every stolen paycheck, every coerced payment, every emergency that wasn't really an emergency. Years of evidence, carefully organized and dated. "She started keeping these about 5 years ago," the lawyer explained. "She told me if anything happened to her, I was to make sure you got them. Said you'd need proof if anyone ever questioned your decision." My brother picked up a receipt from when I was 16. $340 for rent money that had supposedly kept us from being evicted. The date matched the week I'd seen her come home with new designer sunglasses. "She knew," he whispered. "She knew what she was doing the whole time." I didn't know what to feel. Vindication, grief, rage, all of it swirled together into something I couldn't name. She'd known she was wrong and done it anyway. But at least, at the very end, she'd admitted it. At least she'd given me evidence that I wasn't crazy, wasn't cruel, wasn't the villain. "There's one more thing," the lawyer said. He handed me a cashier's check. My heart stopped when I saw the amount. $2,400. She had a small life insurance policy. She left it all to you and your brother. Said it wasn't enough to make up for what she'd taken, but it was all she had left. I stared at the check. It wasn't the $80,000 she'd demanded while dying. It wasn't even close to what she'd stolen over the years, but it was something. A gesture. An acknowledgement. My brother and I walked out of that office in silence. We sat in my car for 20 minutes, not speaking, not moving. Finally, he said, "Do you think she really meant it? The apology?" "I think she meant it as much as she was capable of meaning anything," I replied. We split the insurance money. My brother used his half for grad school tuition. I put mine in savings, adding it to the emergency fund I'd been building for 3 years. Money that was actually mine. Money no one could demand or steal or guilt me into handing over. The letter changed something in me. Not forgiveness exactly. I'm not sure I'll ever fully forgive her, but it did give me closure. Understanding, maybe. She'd been trapped in the same cycle that had trapped her mother. She'd hurt me because she'd been hurt. It didn't make it okay. It didn't erase the damage, but it made her human instead of just a monster. I framed the last page of her letter, Not for nostalgia or sentimentality, but as a reminder. You were right to leave. You were right to protect yourself. On hard days when the guilt creeps back in, I read those words. Words she'd actually written, proof that even she, in the end, knew I'd made the right choice. My brother's wedding arrived last spring. The ceremony was beautiful, held in a garden with Whitney's enormous family filling the seats. When it came time for me to walk him down the aisle, I saw tears in his eyes. "We made it," he whispered as we stood at the entrance. "We actually made it." "Yes," I said, squeezing his arm. "We did." As we walked, I thought about Mom, about the woman who'd given birth to me but couldn't stop seeing me as a resource, about the cycles of abuse that pass from generation to generation until someone is brave enough or desperate enough to break them, about the price we pay for freedom and whether it's worth it. Looking at my brother's face, glowing with happiness as he married into a family that actually knew how to love, I had my answer. Yes. 1,000 times yes. Breaking the cycle was worth every ounce of guilt, every accusation, every lost relationship, because it meant my brother got to stand here today, marrying someone who'd never demand his paycheck. It meant his future children would never have to choose between self-preservation and family obligation. At the reception, Whitney's mom gave a toast. She talked about family, about love, about the bonds we choose versus the bonds we're born into. She looked directly at me when she said, "Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is walk away from people who hurt you, even when they're family, especially when they're family." The room was silent. Then my brother stood up, glass raised. "To my sister," he said, his voice breaking, "who taught me that I deserved better, who showed me what real family looks like, who saved my life by saving her own first." Everyone drank to that. Even Whitney's grandmother, who'd probably never experienced dysfunction like ours. Even the cousins and friends who didn't know our full story. They drank because they could feel the weight of it, the truth of it, even without knowing the details. That night, after the dancing and cake and throwing of the bouquet, my brother found me outside on the terrace. "Thank you," he said simply. "For what?" "For not giving her the money," he replied. "For showing me it was possible to say no. If you hadn't cut her off first, I never would have found the courage to do it. I'd still be working at that warehouse, handing over my paychecks, watching my life disappear." I hugged him tightly. We saved each other. "Yeah," he agreed. "We did." 5 years after Mom's death, our support group has grown into a non-profit organization. We offer counseling, legal aid, and financial literacy programs for people escaping financial abuse from family members. We've helped over 200 people break free, set boundaries, and rebuild their lives. My brother runs the legal aid division while finishing his PhD. I oversee the counseling programs while working full-time as a financial advisor. Every month, someone thanks us for saving their life. Every month, someone stands up in group and says, "I thought I was alone. I thought I was crazy. I thought I was the bad guy." And every month, we get to tell them the same thing I wish someone had told me at 15. "You're not alone. You're not crazy. You're not the bad guy." The work is hard. Every story triggers my own memories. Every terrified 20-year-old who doesn't know how to say no to their parents reminds me of who I was. Every parent who shows up demanding to know why we're poisoning their child's mind against them reminds me of Mom's Facebook rants. But it's also healing. Every person who finds freedom validates my own choices. Every family cycle we help break proves that what I did mattered. Last year, we were featured in a major news article about financial abuse. The response was overwhelming. Hundreds of people reached out with their own stories, but we also received hate mail. Lots of it. People who believed we were teaching children to abandon their parents. People who thought family obligation was sacred, no matter the cost. People who saw us as villains destroying the family unit. One woman wrote me a particularly vicious email. She told me I was going to hell for encouraging children to dishonor their parents. She said my mother probably died of a broken heart because of my cruelty. She hoped I'd experience the same betrayal from my own children someday. I read the email twice, then deleted it. Because here's what I've learned. People who've never been financially abused by family will never understand. They can't fathom a parent who sees their child as an ATM. They can't imagine the systematic manipulation, the guilt, the erosion of self-worth. And that's actually beautiful. That's what we're fighting for. A world where more people can't imagine this kind of abuse because they've never experienced it. My brother met the email writer's daughter at a conference 6 months later. She'd read the article, realized her own mother had been financially abusing her for 8 years, and finally found the courage to stop. She'd used half her first independent paycheck to join our next support group session. The irony wasn't lost on us. This work has taught me something crucial. The people who criticize us most loudly are often the people doing the abusing. They need to believe we're wrong because accepting we're right means accepting their own behavior is abusive. It's easier to paint us as villains than to look in the mirror. I'm 31 now. I have a career I love, an apartment I can actually afford, and relationships that aren't based on transactions. I go on dates with people who ask about my day and don't follow up by asking for money. I have friends who support me without expecting payment. I have a life that's mine. Sometimes I still dream about Mom. Sometimes she's apologizing. Sometimes she's screaming at me. Sometimes we're just sitting together in silence, the way we never did in real life. I wake up from these dreams with my chest tight, my breath shallow. Then I remember, she's gone. I'm safe. I made it out. The guilt never fully disappears. I don't think it's supposed to. I'll probably always wonder if I could have done something differently, if I could have saved her while still saving myself, if there was some perfect balance I missed. But I've learned to live with the guilt, to acknowledge it without letting it consume me. To understand that feeling bad doesn't mean I was bad. My therapist once asked me what I'd say to my 15-year-old self if I could go back. I thought about it for a long time. Finally, I said, I'd tell her that it gets better, that the pain she's feeling isn't permanent, that someday she'll have her own money, her own space, her own life, that she'll help people, that she'll matter. Would you tell her to leave sooner? My therapist asked. No, I realized, because she had to be ready. She had to try everything else first. She had to exhaust every option before she could forgive herself for walking away. That's what people don't understand about abuse. You can't just leave. You have to grieve the parent you wish you had. You have to accept that they'll never change. You have to choose yourself over and over again, every day, against a lifetime of conditioning. It's not one decision. It's 1,000 small decisions, each one requiring courage you're not sure you have. I'm writing a book now, a memoir about financial abuse and family dysfunction and the cost of breaking free. My publisher thinks it could help a lot of people. My brother thinks I'm insane for making our story public. People are going to judge you, he warned. They're going to say terrible things. Let them, I replied. If one person reads this book and realizes they're not alone, realizes they deserve better, realizes they can leave, it'll be worth it. The book releases next month. I'm terrified, but I'm also ready to own my story, ready to stop hiding, ready to tell the truth about what happened and let people think whatever they want. Because I know the truth. I know I was a child who deserved better. I know I was an adult who chose survival. I know I was a daughter who finally loved herself more than she feared her mother's disappointment. My mom always used me for money, so finally I cut her off completely. That decision cost me a mother, but it gave me a life. And if I had to choose again, knowing everything I know now, I'd make the same choice. Not because it didn't hurt, not because I don't still carry scars, but because those scars are proof that I survived. They're proof that I was strong enough to save myself when no one else would. And sometimes, saving yourself is the bravest thing you can do.